I don't think it's fair to the rest of the Celtics to say Jaylen Brown has carried them. You know, he told, I don't know what the exact, I don't know if you have the exact quote.
We don't even have to, we don't have to denigrate.
Like he doesn't play the game fine. In the media, so he didn't get the love. Like, dude.
I'm at the point in my life where it just, I don't give a.
Brown fading away. It's your show.
Be completely honest for a second. What did you expect from Jaylen Brown this season? On its face, that should be a pretty benign question. After all, Jaylen Brown wasn't exactly a mysterious young prospect heading into this season. He spent his entire career as a key member of an extremely successful Celtic team. Every one of his 9 seasons in the league has been played under a national microscope. In theory, his trajectory had been established. Whatever came next was supposed to be a natural continuation of what we already knew him as. But in reality, we never really looked at Jaylen Brown through a clear lens. He's always been defined more by what we thought he wasn't than what he actually was. Every accomplishment was immediately deconstructed and framed as a product of his circumstances. The basketball world at large assumed it knew who Jaylen Brown was and what his limitations were. He was incredibly talented, extremely athletic, and an overall great asset to his team. Still, there was a level of greatness that was inaccessible to him, a tier of stardom that he couldn't reach. But this year, all that's been flipped on its head. Boston's wing has entrenched himself as a superstar in every sense of the word, and now it's time for us to confront the misconceptions that have plagued the Jaylen Brown discourse since he first entered the league. Because anytime a leap this unexpected comes this late, it really means we've been wrong for a long time, because Jaylen Brown might really be Most of the time, a top 3 pick is a lifeline for a franchise, an opportunity to find someone talented enough to make an immediate impact and lift the team out of the lottery. But for Boston, Jaylen Brown was a luxury. His first season as a Celtic, the rookie out of Cal, was a high-energy role player. He started 20 games on the season and took about 5 shots per game, as Isaiah Thomas became a folk hero in Massachusetts. Brown was still contributing, and people who were regularly watching the game saw his potential, but the stats never jumped off the page. Thankfully, the roster changed in his second season. Some of the vets like Jay Crowder and Amir Johnson moved on. IT went to Cleveland in exchange for Kyrie Irving in his prime, and Gordon Hayward made the second biggest splash in free agency by joining his college coach. Then in the same offseason, the Celtics took Jason Tatum with the 3rd overall pick. Somewhere in the background, Brooklyn fans were gathering their pitchforks. But in Boston, spirits were high, and the possibility of a Jaylen Brown sophomore leap only added to that excitement. The idea was for Brown to learn under Hayward. It would be a structured runway that allowed him to gain momentum while keeping his workload light, but a few minutes into their opening game, that was no longer an option.
And that is how quickly a season can change.
Hayward suffered a tragic injury before the halfway mark of the first quarter, and the entire Celtics faithful lost the air in their lungs, and their eyes turned to Jaylen Brown. Without Hayward, Brown couldn't be just a nice contributor. He had to be a reliable starter, someone who could fit into Boston's high IQ offense and relentless defense without skipping a beat, where the season they'd been dreaming about wouldn't get off the ground. Thankfully, Brown was ready for it. He was an impactful defensive presence who knew how to play off his teammates on the offensive end, and every once in a while, he looked like something more, like a shot creator even. But people really weren't concerned with that yet. At the time, they were just happy to see him developing growing into a high-level starter. Brown was shooting nearly 40% from 3, locking down on defense, and constantly making plays in transition. And in the playoffs, he only got better. He led the injury-riddled team in points through their run to the Eastern Conference Finals, and thanks in large part to his contributions, they came one game away from taking down LeBron James and the Cavs. It was the best year 2 imaginable, and in year 3, his momentum came to an abrupt stop. In 2019, he struggled out of the gate, and early into the year, a back injury forced him out of the lineup. When he came back, Boston had found a new rhythm, and Brad Stevens didn't want to mess with a good thing, so he relegated Jaylen Brown to the bench. After that, it felt like the picture was coming together. Jaylen Brown was talented, but he was a system player, a cog in a machine who benefited from the pieces around him and the advanced structure of the entire operation, and the season itself did little to refute that. It was a forgettable and weird year for both JB and the Celtics in general, so in 2020, they flipped the page.
Shared it with some of my teammates as well as the organization and everyone else in Boston. You guys will have me back. I plan on re-signing here next year.
The Kyrie era had come to an end. Boston would be handing the keys of the franchise to their young core. Part of that meant giving Jaylen Brown the opportunity to be a star. This year he was back in the starting lineup and more involved in the offense than ever before. He wasn't hovering around the perimeter and waiting for the ball to come his way. They were running actions through him, and the more they did, the more unique his skill set looked. He was an athletic and imposing slasher with one of the most underrated jump shots in the league, averaging an efficient 20 points per game in the regular season, and in the playoffs, he did the exact same thing. Against Philadelphia, Toronto, and Miami, he was a two-way X factor that the Celtics counted on all the way through the Eastern Conference Finals. The second wing and a terrifying duo that was knocking on the door. Whatever the correct label for that is, it isn't system player. System players don't average 20 on championship contenders. After that breakout, it was impossible not to include Jaylen Brown in conversations around rising young stars, but that didn't mean he was being discussed like a true centerpiece. There were still things he had to do to get there. It was undeniable now that he was dangerous when he got going downhill, and he could reliably step out and knock down a three. He was thriving in structure and transition, but the more committed doubters still had their questions about his ability to get a shot off on his own. His promising play continued, and halfway through the 2021 season, he was named an All-Star for the first time in his career, but everything else was off. The Celtics were inconsistent and defensively mediocre, and they lost in the first round to the Nets after Jaylen Brown went down with an injury. Inside the building, they did some reorganizing up top and stayed calm. Outside the building though, noise started building around the idea of breaking the wing pairing up. The stakes were higher in 2022, and everyone knew that, but Tatum and Brown were ready for the challenge. Over the offseason, Jason Tatum grew into an MVP candidate they could run the entire offense through. Jaylen Brown wasn't that. Instead, he was their two-way co-star, the guy who hit tough shots and took pride in taking on tough matchups night in and night out. Through the regular season, that formula was a breath of fresh air for Boston, and in the playoffs, it was like a drink from the freshest river in the entire Northeast. In round one, they shocked the world by locking up two of the best scorers in the history of the game, getting their revenge against the Nets. Then they went through two wars in the East, against Giannis and the defending champs. The young kids kept making just enough plays when they had to, and in the next round, they finally found a way through Miami in the dreaded Eastern Conference Finals. Way before anyone thought they'd be here, the Celtics were on the cusp of winning a title.
I'm Jaylen Brown, California, Berkeley, right up the street. One day I'll be here in this final.
And by game 4 of the series, it looked like we were watching the birth of a dynasty. Boston was up 2-1 on Steph Curry and the Warriors, and in both of their wins, Jaylen Brown was a key performer. He gave Golden State 24 points in game 1, and then led the team with 27 in game 3. They still needed 2 wins, but at the rate things were moving, a championship and a Jaylen Brown Finals MVP both seemed like realistic possibilities. Unfortunately, that's right when the wheels came off. Steph Steph Curry tapped into a divine state of shot making, and in games 4 and 5, the Warriors found some answers for Brown. He rebounded in game 6 with a 34-point performance, but it was too late. Boston lost. Curry invented a new celebration, and the critiques just got louder.
They won, and we lost. We did it to ourselves, and it stings. Still a young group, still got a lot to learn. Nothing to hang our head about. Tough day for Boston, tough day for the Celtics, but yeah, I don't know what to say.
People ripped into Jaylen Brown's handle, flooring every comment section with jokes about his lack of a left hand, and the questions that were looming in the background came to the forefront. Most fans didn't believe he had the technical skill to hold up in the game's biggest moments. In the next season, he did a lot to dispute that. Brown put up career highs across the board and made his first All-NBA team in 2023, but his numbers slipped slightly in the playoffs and the Celtics lost to the Heat in the conference finals. That wasn't enough to impress anyone anymore. Heading into 2024, Boston retooled. They added Kristaps Porzingis and Drew Holiday to an already loaded roster, and for the betterment of the team, Jaylen Brown willingly took on a slightly smaller role in the regular season. Then in the playoffs, he flipped a switch. In the first 3 rounds, it didn't matter much. The Celtics were so much better than their opponents that their individual contributions kind of melted together. But in the finals, against a dangerous Mavs team, JB made his presence undeniable. In games 1 and 2, he was excellent, an integral part of Boston's plans to slow down Luka and Kyrie defensively, and he was an efficient weapon offensively. Then in game 3, he took it to the next level. He was driving with his left and making plays off the dribble, cutting at just the right time, and doing whatever else Joe Mazzulla asked of him in an all-around masterpiece to keep the Mavs from getting any momentum in that series. Just 2 games later, his teammates were mobbing him as he walked across the stage to accept the award that slipped through his fingers 2 years ago. And another misconception was answered. You can't win a finals MVP off athleticism alone. For the most part, the 2024 season ended any serious worries around Jaylen Brown's game. It's tough to poke holes in a resume with an All-NBA selection and a finals MVP at the top. But over time, a new point of contention came into the picture. He wasn't a true number 1. Sure, Brown was an elite player and one of the best co-stars in the league. He wasn't facing teams' best defenders every night and finding new ways to create offense. Obviously, this was a nitpick, but as far as nitpicks go, it was hard to completely refute. It was true that more often than not, opponents were putting their best defenders on Jason Tatum. And on top of that, Boston was so stocked with talent that Brown was getting a disproportionate amount of one-on-one opportunities. That was still the case in 2025, right up until Tatum went down late in their series against the Knicks. But this season was his chance to get rid of that annoying label. Holiday and Porzingis were out of Boston, and Jason Tatum was going to be watching most of the season from the sideline. No more ridiculous lineups to play off of, and no proven co-star to take some attention off of him. He was going to be the number 1 name on the scouting report every single night, and the expectations for what that was going to look like were relatively low. Analysts had the Celtics fighting to make the play-in, and Brown as a productive but somewhat inefficient substitute engine that could at least keep them above water. Really, that didn't seem all that unreasonable at the time, but it was. It was misguided and immediately disproven within the first couple months. Up until the start of the new year, Brown was averaging nearly 30 points per game on above 50% from the field, while keeping Boston near the top of the standings. And 3 days after that calendar turned, he made absolutely sure the basketball world was paying attention to what was happening, while making sure that he was the guy defending Kawhi Leonard at all times. Jaylen Brown dropped 50 on a ridiculous 18 for 26 shooting against the Los Angeles Clippers. Since then, it's been more of the same. He's been assigned to the toughest defenders the other team has, creating in and out of structure, and still maintaining all of his defensive responsibilities that put him on the map in the first place. And now, as award season approaches, he's a few weeks away from adding some more illustrious accolades to his already already historic career. So yeah, a lot of us were caught off guard from this amazing season from Jaylen Brown. But then again, a lot of us were surprised by his finals MVP and his first All-NBA selection. And every other time, he found a way to do exactly what we said he couldn't. As a community, we might as well learn our lesson and accept the fact that it's time to stop telling Jaylen Brown what his ceiling is. I mean, at the very least, we'll save ourselves from having to make any more apologies in the future.